Hello, book people. PT here. Today, I want to talk to you about the book Underground Airline by Ben Winters. So, Ben Winters, you may remember him for his previous set of novels, which starts with The Last Policeman, and is kind of a story that takes place in a world where this guy is trying to be a policeman, and a meteor is headed. I think it's a meteor or asteroid. We'll say meteor is headed towards the Earth and about to crash into the Earth in a few months, and everyone knows it, and so the world is kind of going crazy. I thought it was a really cool detective story set against this backdrop of this cool science fiction idea. The next book is similar in theme in that it is a detective story that takes place in kind of a world different than our own. So the story of Underground Airline it takes place in present-day United States where the Civil War never happened. Abraham Lincoln was assassinated, I believe, on the campaign trail, and when he was running for president. And the 13th Amendment, instead of abolishing slavery, the 13th Amendment was that the federal government could not interfere with the individual states' decisions about slavery. So it's present day, and most of the states have outlawed slavery, but there are still 4 that have slavery. The story is about this guy named Victor, who is a escaped slave himself, and he is presently working for the U.S. Marshal Service, helping to track down other escaped slaves and recapture them and send them back to slavery. So, very morally ambiguous character, and that's really the feel of this book, is that I really love the characters in this book. There's no character really that is all good or all evil. Well, maybe there's a couple all evil characters, but for the most part, people are very morally gray. Like even the people who are trying to help the slaves, you kind of get some insight into maybe some of their reasoning, where it's maybe a little bit selfish at times. So the characters I thought were very well drawn. So there's kind of 2 ways you can look at this book. You can look at it as a detective story, or you can look at it as kind of a science fiction alternate history. From the perspective of it as a crime story or a detective story, I think it works great. Our main character, Victor, he is sent on assignment to Indianapolis to track down this escaped slave, and the case file he gets has some weird things missing, and as often happens in these noirish crime stories, he starts to dig a little deeper and uncovers something much bigger, and he's warned by his superiors that he shouldn't go down this track, but he does anyway, and what he uncovers reveals a lot to us about this world, and ends up being a very emotional experience for him, where he learns a lot, has to think a lot about his place in the world and what he's been doing for the last 10 years or whatever, as well as just being a really good mystery. There were a lot of really interesting surprises that I did not see coming, and the story took a lot of cool turns. The other way to look at it is an alternate history. So I've seen some criticisms of the book from that perspective, from people who went into it more wanting to learn about this alternate timeline kind of a thing, maybe more your Harry Turtledove fans. I've seen a lot of things in reviews that are like, the book sets up the idea that the United States has really poor relations with most other countries in the world because we still have slavery, which totally makes sense. But a lot of these reviews have been like, well, how does that, what would the United States' roles have been in the world wars because of these relations, and how would an XYZ event have taken place in this alternate world? So some of the criticisms I've seen have been like that they didn't explore that kind of stuff enough, the alternate timeline stuff enough. For me, that's not really what I'm into. I don't read, I'm not super into reading alternate history books that dive deeply into the various events of the timeline. I don't need to know everything that happened between 1860 whatever and today. So for me, I felt like there was just enough detail, and it felt realistic. There was enough stuff in there, enough little tidbits that the world felt real to me, and sparked my imagination, while at the same time it didn't get bogged down in chapter after chapter of detailed histories of everything that's gone on between the 1860s and today. So in my opinion, it struck a really good balance there. So if you're the kind of person who likes crime stories in a science fiction-y world and is interested in looking at a United States that's a little bit different than our own, I think you'll really enjoy this book. It is definitely an emotional book as well, which you know, especially towards the end, man, it gets pretty intense up in there. I listened to the audiobook, which was narrated by William Demerit, and he did an awesome job. You know, sometimes I feel like audiobook narrators can get a little too into like having different voices for the different characters, where it feels like they're almost like doing weird impressions or something like that. I thought William Demerit had like a really good balance of he you could tell who was speaking at all times, but it never felt like he was putting on a weird voice for any of the characters. So anyway, he did a great job. So I would recommend checking this out in audio. If this is your first time watching my channel, please consider subscribing. I put out new book reviews on Mondays and new comic reviews on Thursdays. Here's a couple videos you might like. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.